Most scientific opinion is now agreed. We're facing global warming. The rising temperatures, if they continue unchecked, will bring sea level rises and potential disaster in low-lying countries around the world. In the next generation, it's believed drinking water will be contaminated with seawater. Agricultural use of land will have to stop, and there are suggestions that in 40 years there will be 150 million refugees as a direct result of higher sea levels. The Asian monsoon directly impacts the lives of 2/3 of the world's population, yet surprisingly little is known of its history, how much it's varied in intensity over time, and what its impact is on global weather patterns.
During the last years we have heard a lot about flooding, about forest fires, so extreme weather events.
The climate system is changing a lot. How much of this is natural, we don't know. How much is caused by human impact, we also don't know.
So big question is, are these events due to that climate is changing or has already changed, or are these events kind of a recurring natural feature? This is no way.
Much of scientific opinion believes that global weather patterns are driven by events in the North Atlantic, but some believe those opinions are skewed.
We have a rather good understanding of past climate change in Europe and in North America, especially for the last 20,000 years. But we know very, very little about how climate has changed in this part of the world.
Barbara believes the difficulty of conducting field studies here has meant the history of the monsoon has had little or no attention from scientists who historically have been based in Northern Europe or America. She and her team are the first to look at lake sediments in Thailand as an environmental and climatic archive.
There are almost no studies dealing with past changes in monsoon intensity, and that's the reason why we came to Thailand, because we want to see how has the monsoon varied in the past, how did changes in monsoon impact on ecosystems, and for this we use lake sediments to trace past changes.
Back in the laboratory in Sweden, the sediments will undergo detailed analysis. Sections will be cut and processed. Painstaking observations will then be made of the content of the sediments. Asian economies and societies are strongly dependent on the recurrence of the summer monsoon rains. Accurate predictions are therefore vital. After a previous successful mission to the lakes of northern Thailand, the team has travelled south for this year's research trip. And again, it's the sediments at the bottom of lakes where the search begins. Material from the surroundings gets washed in, plants die, leaves and seeds fall into the water. Animals live in or around the lake. When they die, their remains form part of the sediment that gathers at its bottom. Volcanic eruptions around the world throw ash into the sky, some of which ends up here.
Since sediments accumulate on the lake bottom year after year after year, they are able to tell us a very nice story about how climate has varied over time.
The team, made up of scientists from Stockholm University, the University of Nebraska-Lincoln in the States and Chulalongkorn University in Bangkok, has come to one of Thailand's national parks. Loading inflatable dinghies with simple hand-coring equipment, they set off to scour the vast lake, looking for the perfect location to drill.
Finding the right spot is often quite tricky because generally we have very little background information about the lakes, so we have to look at maps, topographic maps, we look at satellite images, and we talk to local people to identify suitable lakes, because we want to have undisturbed sediments. We don't want the lakes to have been excavated or heavily used for any purpose.
We have spent the last 2 field seasons in the north, in northeastern Thailand and in northern Thailand, and it was very, very hard to find suitable sites for us to work with. We surveyed at least, I would say, 10, 15, 20 different lakes that we thought would be really suitable, but it turned out that only very few, actually only 2 or maybe 3 contained sediments that I thought are worth studying further.
What the team is looking for is a lake which contains soft sediments. A lake that has been dredged will have little benefit in terms of studying past climatic conditions. 2 of the biggest elements in the Thai economy are making the task of finding suitable locations very difficult.
People have clearly been a part of this landscape for thousands and thousands of years, but human impact, I think, is intensified in the last century or 2 or 3, and so this creates a lot of problems for us as people trying to find good lake environments.
Yeah, one problem that we have encountered is that wetlands or lakes that are not part of a national park, that they are either used for recreation or that they are transformed into shrimp farms and used for cultivating shrimps, and that of course for this they have to dredge the sediments out, they have to make special preparations to create those shrimp farms, and as a consequence our lakes disappear.
A lot of the tourist trade here is from people wanting to see spectacular flowers that cover the water.
Many of these lakes are maintained for the lotus flowers and the water lilies, and in doing so those plants need open water.
The natural progression would be for the open water to eventually become overgrown, making this a shallow wetland. As the lake is maintained to keep the tourists happy, it makes it hard to find sediment that is undisturbed.
Get it as clean as possible.
The team does eventually find some of what it's looking for, but the examples are shallow. The deeper the sediment, the older the record. So for a greater understanding of climate history, the decision is made to try a different lake with even less background. Leading the coordination and the location finding are Thai PhD and master's students who are known by their family pet names Moo, Koi and Nut. They organise the trip, they book the buses, they book the drivers, they book the hotels, they fix everything.
I think it's extremely important to have Thai students working on material from Thailand, bringing that knowledge back to Thailand, and at the same time, through the education they gain in Sweden, increase their own knowledge, both in terms of environmental science, climate change issues, and so on.
They have the knowledge of the language knowledge, of course, and they know the culture. They interact with the local people, and the local people actually helped us find very promising sites on several occasions. It would not be possible to get all the proper permits, not even to find a way without the students.
I think for us to be here without the involvement of Thai people is irresponsible if it's possible.
The fieldwork leads to a rather unusual student-teacher relationship.
We spend 14 hours most days, some days 16 hours together. We get up in the morning, have breakfast, we travel in the van, we plan the field work, we blow up rubber rafts and paddle around on lake and take cores. We have all our meals together, and so this is really a pretty intense experience with other people, and so doing field work you often get to know them really, really well.